The Game of Zen explores the often overlooked ways in which professional, personal, and spiritual growth are interrelated. We dive deep into the life teachings of the Buddha and the mindfulness practices of Zen, revealing how they can help us dramatically expand our possibilities for wholehearted work, life, and play.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Game of Zen podcast. I'm really excited today to have a special guest for you today, Pat Croce. Welcome, Pat. We're really thrilled to have you here.
Scott, it's great to be with you and Paul. Thanks for inviting me.
You got it. So I'm going to start off giving some highlights of Pat's really incredible business career, starting as a physical therapist for the Philadelphia Flyers in the 80s. Pat was working with many pro athletes from the Philly area at his facility. He then became an athletic trainer for the 76ers, and that led him to working with a lot of the Sixer draft picks and athletes and help them with their conditioning. So then he founded physical therapy centers, grew them into a chain of 40 stores. He had an exit in 1993. In 1996, Pat put a deal together with Ed Snyder and Comcast to buy the Sixers from Harold Katz. Now, at the time of that purchase, the Sixers were on a downslope and really hadn't had a bunch of good years. And Pat came in and made it better right away. And it was a very exciting time. We'll get into that more later. They also made a trip to the NBA Finals in 2001. After that, Pat was a TV commentator for the Summer Olympics and the NBA. 2005, he opened the St. Augustine Pirate and Treasure Museum in Key West. He's written a bunch of best-selling books, including one called I Feel Great and You Will Too. Many of those on self-help and pirates. He's an accomplished real estate investor, a black belt in Taekwondo, and also a cancer survivor. So lots of great stuff. I met Pat in about 1996. I've been the head statistician for the 76ers for 35 years. And I have to say, when he came to town, it was a great thing. We all loved it, and everything got better.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Pat, it's really nice to meet you. This pod is about integrating mindfulness or Zen mindfulness into everyday life, especially in the context of entrepreneurship and business. So to start, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about what brought you into meditation practice, into spiritual practice, and what your practice is like these days. What's your Sangha community like?
First of all, Paul and Scott, I got to say, I love the name Game of Zen. I love that. It's really good. And we're all playing it. Most people don't know it, unfortunately. When they start knowing that the game is such a beautiful game and that you're the server and the receiver of every shot, it's just a wonderful journey. I started meditation 9 years ago, almost. It was the beginning of 2015. And Paul and Scott, it's like one of those in Zen Satoris. Something happened where I read a quote, and the quote had an effect on me. My mind kind of went to no mind. I went, whoa, it's that aha moment that, wow. And the quote was by an author by the name of Iyer, Pico Iyer. He's written a book on stillness and has done TED Talks on stillness. Now, stillness is not, Scott, you knew me. That's not something I would use as an attribute of who I was. However, I was on a trip down to Key West to look at some of our business interests with my wife, and it was January exactly 20th, because I start journaling that day. I never journaled before that. And I read this in a travel magazine. This Pico Iyer wrote something to the effect of, everything occurs in our mind: memory, imagination, speculation, interpretation. So if you want to change your life, everything occurs in our heads: memory, imagination, speculation, interpretation. So if you want to change your life, you best begin by changing your mind. And I got to tell you guys, I went, it dawned on me. It was like an inquiry. Can you change your mind? I never gave my mind to mind. Never, ever once did I think of, can you change your mind? I've changed bodies. As you said, Scott, I was a physical therapist and an athletic trainer. I had both worlds, and I melded them into what you now know as sports medicine. And then it was kind of novel. But changing your mind, I could change my opinion, but to change your mind. And so I went to a TED talk that this fellow Picar had about stillness, and it was just really intriguing for me. And that led me to a second TED talk on mindfulness. And Paul, I didn't even know what the word was. He talked about mindfulness and entrepreneurship. I had never heard the word before. And this is January of 2015. And his name was Andy Podicombe, a former monk who has since, I learned, because I used the app initially on meditation, Headspace. And that was the first. So I saw him, he's juggling for 10 minutes and he's talking so smoothly and intricately about just observing your mind. And it took away all the barriers to meditation that I had believed in from the 70s, when it was, just chanting TM and smelling like patchouli and cross-legged lotus position, all that stuff that is not necessary unless you want to do it. And then that led me to a third talk, because I start getting addicted to this. It's like, wow, this is a whole new realm for me. And I should say I was retired as of January 1 of that year, 2015. I left all my business interests to my son and son-in-law, Michael and Jeff. So I was done. And my wife is saying, we'll see about that, because I was always after more. And she would always ask, what are you chasing? I'm thinking, what are you talking about? I'm chasing money. I'm chasing success. I'm chasing fame. I'm chasing. So I had no clue. I was ego painted all over me. I should have had that tattoo right across my head. And so this last TED Talk was by Mathieu Ricard, the Buddhist monk who, when he was 26, left the prestigious Pasteur Institute to go be with the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans in India. And he has since become the French interpreter, brilliant man. His father was like the brilliant philosopher in France. And there's a great book called The Monk and the Philosopher. And it's him and his father discussing philosophy versus Buddhism. And it's a great treatise to Buddhism. I mean, a wonderful. And it happens to be a year or so later, I dragged Diane to Bhutan, the mountains of Bhutan, so that we could be with him for a retreat for almost a month. But that's how it got started. And so my meditation, I really thought, Paul, to your question, I thought it had to be a disciplined practice, no different than my training, my physical training. I mean, as I was always have trained all my life, the physicality of the body. And so that was always important to me. The mind, not so much. You study when you have to study, you give a talk, you prepare, you memorize, whatever you must do to educate, inform, entertain. However, this was something totally different, to just watch your thoughts. Really, the breakthrough for me was to realize that there's a voice in the head. I didn't know there was a frickin' thing. I thought that was me. I really thought that was me. And I share with people now, I think the first step on the spiritual path, whatever that spiritual path is, the first step is to recognize that you either cause suffering or you suffer. As the Buddha said, it's his first noble truth. Suffering exists in this human experience. But that's really, like, I didn't know I caused suffering. And when I was angry, I didn't know that was suffering. It was righteous indignation. I deserved to be angry. Now, I had no clue that I had a ripple effect, and the resonance that was out there was a low vibrational frequency that caused people to walk on eggshells. My wife, my two children, I had no clue, not a clue in the world. Maybe because the old man used to beat me up when I was a kid, and that was just normal, Italian tough love. But nevertheless, that was probably the first step, is recognizing what dukkha is, what suffering, any iteration of it. Just dissatisfaction, frustration, deceit, whatever you want to call it, worry. And then the second one to me was to recognize that this voice in my head, as the Buddhists call it, the monkey mind, as thoughts swinging from branch to branch and screaming and yelling, and I'm listening to all the chattering as if it's me talking to me. I had no idea that the thoughts weren't true, weren't you, and let them flow through. That's a mnemonic I made for myself to just keep saying, that's not me. In so much that I named it. I named the voice in my head, the Wild Irishman and the Angry Italian. The Wild Irishman from Braveheart, he's painted up and he looks at the guy. I don't know about me, but it was just this Wild Irishman says all kinds of stuff to me, but now I don't listen to it. It just flows through. But to answer your question, Paul, it started as a disciplined practice, sitting 10 minutes. I couldn't even sit still. I thought stillness meant sitting still. I'm telling you, you're talking to a locker room knucklehead. I had no clue what the spiritual path was. I wasn't a spiritual seeker. I didn't know what enlightenment was, awakening, self-realization, moksha, whatever word you want to use. Sunyata, emptiness. I had not a clue. So this past 9 years has been such a beautiful, loving, happy journey that it just keeps unfolding. That's why your podcast is so powerful. If people only realize that if you invest the game of Zen in the game of life, it changes your life.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Yeah, fantastic, Pat. And I do want to dig a little bit more into the evolution here, because it occurred to me that when you started off down the path of physical therapy, you were in the business of relieving suffering, actually. And you help people physically, but also you help people with your amazing attitude. I feel great. You weren't just, when you went to your rehab center, and I did one time for a bad ankle, I felt really good about my ankle, but I just felt good in general because of your positive attitude. So I think that was probably the start of this evolutionary path, right? When you were healing people.
But I wouldn't have known it then. That's a good point. And thank you, Scott. I was always about PMA. I think my mom passed on her DNA of PMA, a positive mental attitude. I always went at the glass, not even half full, but it was full. It was always full. I mean, and I made sure that pervaded with all my staff in every center, with every patient. I wanted them. I challenged every physical therapist, trainer, exercise physiologist, even the receptionist, to make sure that they are the topic of conversation at that patient's dinner table that night. Mm-hmm. That was so important to me, that ripple effect, because every patient, when you saw them, whether it was back pain, a reconstructed knee, a sprained ankle, car accident, whatever it might be, they are in pain. But as the Buddha said, and this is one of my intentions, Paul, being a Zen master, I love, whether it was the Buddha or a tenet of the Buddhism, pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. I love that, because if I can transmit the means and ways to let people know that, yeah, you're going to, in this human experience, you are going to suffer pain. However, dukkha, suffering, well, and I'm not talking, this, I'm talking to the choir. I'm not talking about grief, sadness, because that's rooted in love. I'm talking about the suffering, the psychological suffering rooted in fear, that fear-based suffering. And that's not necessary. And Scott, I didn't know at the time that we were alleviating the fear-based suffering, that someone would sit on a treatment table and they would have faith and confidence in what you're placing your hands on their body and palpating and feeling. And that's one of the things. We would have these 10 service commandments using a first name or an honorific if it was a doctor or someone like a priest or a rabbi. However, touch. And it was before, the whole meat phenomena, but it was like, put your hands on them, shake hands, hug, feel their body, and let them feel that you really care about them. So you're right. I was on the path and didn't even know it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I really also think the next step in your career too, it was another illustration of you being on the path, and this is the story of how you put together the deal to buy the Sixers. You went from athletic trainer to part owner and president of the Sixers, and you were dealing with some very powerful, famous people in the Phillies. So tell us a little bit about how that came about.
I'm a good listener. And I even to this day, I tell people, we're not in control. We're the doer. We're the doing. We're, as Hafiz would say, the Sufi mystic from the 14th century, I am the hole in the flute that the Christ breath moves through. Listen to this music. It's our responsibility to be the very best hole in the flute and allow the musician to play her music. Allow, whomever, Buddha's music, whatever, who's ever music. But it's for us to really be open, empty, available, and aware. And I used to be, it was for me listening. And I heard Harold Katz, the former owner. I went to him with him for a lunch, and I just sold my business. I fulfilled the 2-year employment contract, but I was done. I didn't like the sitting around meetings. It wasn't me. Let's get stuff done. It was just not me. My 40 centers really were the catalyst. They had 140, but it became NovaCare. But it's my people still run the company. Like, it's really because we had the systems down, the culture, the team esprit. But I didn't know what I wanted to do next. And, I was too young. I had money now, but so I was meeting with certain people, one of which was Chuck Barris, remember the Gong Show?
Yeah.
One was Ed Snyder, owner of the Flyers. One was Harold Katz. And I knew Harold because I was the physical therapist for the team. Like, as you say, the athletic trainer, I was the therapist in charge of all the injuries, whether it was Charles Barkley's round mound of rebound. I had to get him to a svelte 250 at the time, or whomever. So I really wanted to question him on, give me some advice. And I would just question to see. I had no idea that I didn't know how intimate and vital the state of not knowing was. I didn't know that was our true essence. I just was curious. Luckily, I was curious. I had that curious energy my whole life and listened. I was a really good listener. And so Harold, I could see that he was upset about the team, and the fans in Philadelphia hated him because the team was lousy, and they forgot he won a championship in '83. This is 95 now. And, in Philadelphia, what have you done for me? What wins have you had lately? And it's just such a beautiful town with sports fans who are rabid. And when you lose, my first year is scary. But when you win, you walk on water. It's that beautiful polarity. And so I could tell that he was dissatisfied with life as it was. And I just blurted out, sell me 10% of the team. I'll bring in my team esprit. I'll bring in positive attitude. I'll take the brunt of everything. I'll be out there. I'll market it. You sit back and just watch, and I will help to make this a winner, I guarantee. He said, no, Pat, nah, I'm not ready to sell. When I sell, it'll be all or nothing. Well, what I heard, I didn't hear no. I heard all or nothing. So I contacted Ronnie Rubin, who was, I call my Jewish godfather in Philadelphia, who had the connections with everyone, who I loved, and he introduced me to Comcast. Brian and Ralph Roberts, the chairman and CEO of Comcast, which are based in Philadelphia. I didn't know them. They didn't know me. I went there on my motorcycle, and I went up into the top floor. I think I was above the clouds. And so I just told Ronnie was brilliant. So it wasn't really my brilliance. It was Ronnie he saw that the Cablevision company in New York had bought the Knicks and the Rangers in Madison Square Garden, and it became an entity for them to create a television network. Mm-hmm. Why couldn't Comcast do that in Philadelphia? And they bought it. They bought in. So now it's a couple of days later, I call Harold Katz. I said, Harold, last time we talked, you said it was all or nothing. I said, well, I'll buy it all.
Nice.
He goes, no. He said, no, I'm not ready to sell yet. And if I was to sell, it'd be at least $125 million, because that's what the Toronto franchise was, just brand new. Toronto Raptors had just come into the league. Well, I hung up and I'm dancing around. He said a price. Anyone who negotiates, you never say the price first, right? Yes, 125 million. Okay. Now, it was gigantic money. However, look what they're worth now, a couple billion. But nevertheless, I went back to Ronnie Rubin and Comcast, 125 million. Look at that. And so for the next months, I just kept wearing him down. I wore his persistence down his resistance down with my persistence. And eventually he gave me the option to get the team and the money. And then the deal went down April 19th, 1996. And it was remarkable, because here I'm advanced from the training room to the boardroom, and I could show everyone that we can do it. Like Philadelphia can have a can-do attitude, and dreams do come true. And Paul, it was pretty wild in Philadelphia at that time because people were wondering, why are you taking over a last place, sickly, sucking team? They had only won 18 games of an 82 game schedule the year before, and I said, okay, yeah, that's the opportunity. Well, the first year we only won 22, but bring it on. We're slowly but surely. But as Scott said, the 5th year we were in the finals against the Lakers for the championship.
Brilliant. What you've done there, Pat. And growing up in Connecticut, I've been a Knicks fan my whole life, so I'm long suffering and incredibly impressed with what you did with that franchise. This quality of listening that was right at the heart of your transfer of ownership of that, really stepping into that plunge of taking over is really resonant. I think it really is helpful to people to understand how important that is, to really listen deeply to where people are coming from and what's important to them. And what you said something a little bit ago that I thought was really profound. You said you were on the path without knowing you were on the path. And I think a lot of people don't recognize that, because in some sense we say we're all on the path. And it just gets activated more, at certain times in our life. But we have this intrinsic, desire to kind of do good and to operate, wholeheartedly, I think, in our lives. So I'm curious about the next stage in you taking over the Sixers and what you did to perhaps see what was discordant or unwholesome in the culture, and how you changed the culture there.
Well, that's a great question. And again, it comes down to the Socratic method of asking questions and listening. And I took every employee that was there and I sat them across from me and I gave them a pen. And I said, this is your magic wand. What would you do differently? And I kept those who wanted change, and those who didn't, I let go. And I replaced, but I was lucky because I won the lottery that year, and we picked Allen Iverson, who became a superstar. But the city of Philadelphia, I should say something, and Scott would know this, that it was my intent. I'm born and bred in Philadelphia, so I wasn't like everyone else. I wasn't transient like a thought or a feeling. I didn't come and go. I was Philadelphia. That was the essence of this realm of form of me. And I made it a point. We only had 3,000 total season ticket holders. It holds, what, 20,000, Scott, something like that?
Yeah.
I mean, 3,000. So I created a director of fan relations, my buddy Joe Masters. I brought him in from my old business because I know he can deal with everyone and anyone and is a great listener. And we would distribute 50 to 100 tickets to schools, to organizations, Lions clubs, nursing facilities. I didn't care. I wanted everyone from all walks of life, from all classes of life, from the street to the elite, to have the exposure to come into this arena and see this new product. And I wanted every one of our players, 15 players, to pick a charity, pick a community initiative that they would be the ambassador for. That was really important to me. And the Players Union only allows 3 appearances, mandatory 3 appearances. But, Paul, if you have a relationship with players, then you can ask them to do things without infringing on the union. And they have their own, but let's all go to Children's Hospital Christmas time. We'll get the red hats and we'll bring gifts. And, it was just, I think that we poured so much fuel of goodwill and loving kindness out into the community that when the team start doing good year 3, it ignited and exploded.
Yeah. Yeah. Sixer fans were ready for it. I mean, they're very passionate and they were ready for a change. And you came in and changed everything, really. And you gave it a whole different culture. You even put food back in the press room, which I appreciated. That was
Scott, like they would check us out, Paul. The press, those that are going to talk about you. I was always into marketing, even in physical therapy. I was kind of like poo-pooed originally because in physical therapy, you didn't market yourself. It was kind of medicine. I said, why? Churches ring their bells every day to let you know they're there. That's all I'm doing. I'm not saying I'm better than anyone else. So I had all kinds of marketing schemes. Eventually, the APTA invites me to come and speak to them all because now physical therapy is cool and we're on a pedestal. Why would you not feed the press some righteous? Give them full hot meals. These guys will eat potato chips and Cokes if you leave it to them. So, that was the place. Even when we were bad, even if they're writing negative about you, at least they know you care. There was an element of kindness, right? So the franchise, all I was a liaison. It's Philadelphia 76ers. It doesn't say Comcast 76ers. It doesn't say at Croce. We're just a liaison, an ambassador. So I wanted the entire community, New Jersey, South Jersey, Philadelphia, Delaware, and fans across the world to see that there was something happening with a very positive slant in Philadelphia.
Yeah. And so I have another story about how you made people feel great all the time. And this is, so 2001, the Sixers make a run to the finals, and Allen Iverson, game one, makes a corner jump shot and steps over Tyronn Lue, and the Sixers are up 1-0. And we're all super excited. Pat, a couple days earlier, actually climbed on top of the Walt Whitman Bridge, which was absolutely nuts, and hung a banner up, and everybody was just fired up. So then we lost game 2, and we came back to Philly, and we lost game 3, game 4, and game 5. Kobe Bryant from Lower Merion High School and Shaquille O'Neal, they came in and they just ripped it out, and they won the title. So after the game, I was leaving the stadium about an hour later, said goodbye to a bunch of people, and there was a long hallway that I walked out where the players' families were, and I saw Pat walking at the end of the hallway, and he always said hello and was always very nice to us and high-fived and stuff. But this was a very heavy moment. Everybody was crushed, and I figured, he was bummed out, and so I was just going to wave and keep walking. So I'm walking down the hallway, and we get there, and Pat stops and looks at me and gives me a hug and says, "Thank you for a great season. It stinks the way we lost, but I really appreciate everything you did this season, and thank you very much." And I got to tell you, Pat, I was blown away by that. I just was like, I can't believe you did that. And it really made an effect on me. And I just wanted to tell you that I appreciated it.
Wow. You sure you weren't dreaming?
I'm positive. I remember.
Thank you. No, I'm honored. Thank you that you would remember that. Thank you.
I'm sure that one of the reasons you might not remember is because you did that for a lot of people, though. You really made everybody feel important.
Well, and this podcast is for entrepreneurs. That's the me becomes a we, and it doesn't change. In the spiritual path, the we might become a me, and then the me dissolves into the everything. Like, so it became like it's full. I never said that before, but talking to you guys, it's full circle. Like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. And what I liked about that too was it didn't matter what level you were on. You were able to deal with people, and now let's go up to the top level of the organization and dealing with Iverson and Larry Brown. Okay. And here you have like one of the great players we've ever seen, Iverson, and you have one of the best coaches ever. But those two guys clashed a lot. Hey, I didn't love practice. Larry Brown wanted everyone to play the right way. Somehow you managed to get these guys together. You put them on the same path. They ended up loving each other. How did that come about? And how did your spirituality play into all that?
Again, I would not have called it spirituality at the time, although I did have a tenet in my heart. If I do my best, God takes care of the rest. So that kind of even flows into the now. However, that was my only tenet. That was the only spirituality, if you were to call it spirituality. I didn't know really about our true nature. I didn't know the essence of presence. I didn't know any of that. However, I think it all started on the path to the path, Paul. I'm talking about back in high school and college, hanging on the corner with a gang of guys. Well, it could be 6 guys, it could be 8 guys, 10 guys. There was conflict, and I would always moderate. And people would listen to me, not because I had the right words, but because I could kick their ass. And always a great fighter, and then even a martial artist that proceeded into international karate tournaments. they knew that, if you're going to play that game, we're going to play really hard. And I never fought with any of my buddies ever. However, I was always a moderator and tried to bring it down to a less intense energy level. And at that Iverson Larry Brown, they wanted to. I got a call the night before they were coming back from Detroit. It was a blowout game, and Allen Iverson got benched. Paul, he got benched, and Allen Iverson doesn't like to get benched, and he might have MF'd the coach. And the coach called me that night. He never calls me, and he said he wanted him traded the next day. And Iverson, Bubba Chuck, never calls me, never. Mm-hmm. And he called me and said, "I want him fired. Mm-hmm. I want that coach fired." So I said, "We'll meet in the morning before practice." And we met in the morning, and the whole team's outside, the big window to the conference room, and myself and Billy King in there, the general manager. And they both sit down, and it was really heated, awkward. This was not the silence we use in meditation, where it's just pure expansion of the heart. This was a low vibrational frequency that you could just feel the cloud of black energy. And whatever I said, it came about to be that you two are looking at replicas of yourself. You don't realize this. You both love the game. You love to win. The way you do it is your own way, and I respect that. Let me tell you, he's not getting fired, and you're not getting traded. So put that on the table, and now how are we going to work that out? And Iverson's like this, and Larry Brown's not saying anything. He doesn't even want to be in this meeting. He thinks that I brought him down to a lesser level. And then eventually I went into how would you feel, Alan? It was all questioning and direct experiencing. Paul, putting it in that teacher or student mode. How would you feel if someone you pulled off the court MF'd you in front of the whole audience, and you ignored them and you disrespected them? And Larry Brown's nodding his head. And I said, "Larry, how would you feel if you were a player and you said, 'Sit down'? And the player felt that you were saying, 'Sit down,' N-word, similar to when he was in prison that year, that you were more like the white game warden." Mm-hmm. And Larry Brown kind of, whoa. So both of them had this glimpse of reality, like their mind stopped and, whoa. And I know in Zen you call those Satoris or no mind moments, or I'm not saying it's enlightening, but it is consciousness recognizing itself outside this form. Allen Iverson, black, Larry Brown, white, Allen Iverson, young, Larry Brown, old, Allen Iverson, hip hop, Larry Brown, doo-wop, whatever you want to say. They were so different in a sense, but it was the similarities that I was bringing to the table. And eventually Allen Iverson got up, walked around, and he hugged him. He hugged him. And I think that was the fourth year, Scott, at the end of fourth year or beginning of fifth year. I'm not sure, but there was never ever a problem again. I mean, they didn't have another problem until I left. And then obviously they might have had some problems, but I wasn't there.
Yeah.
It's a really powerful story, Pat. It's really amazing. And you activated a really profound energy of connection in that. And you've said a few things about the aftermath of that I wanted to ask you about. I guess you said Larry, even afterwards, felt a little resentment towards you for forcing that thing to happen. I think he was less comfortable with it, perhaps.
Hey there, Paul, let me interrupt. So much so that I go home after practice. They resume practice. And I get a yell in the house, and we had phones then. Diane, my wife, says, "Larry Brown's on the phone." Oh, I think he's all psyched that this was resolved. He was so mad at me. Don't you ever put me in a situation where I'm at the level of don't you? I was stunned. I was shocked. I went from elation to utter befuddlement. I couldn't, so that was the beginning of a crack in our relationship, but it didn't matter because I didn't allow it to affect me. I wasn't going to judge him. He just felt that in his old ways, he's a coach and the players are below him or beneath him. But to your point, it was.
And what you said to him at that point, and I don't know if you remember this, but I did pick this up from an interview that you had done a number of years ago. You said, Larry, you didn't have a relationship with Allen. There just wasn't anything there. And now you have a relationship. And that's incredibly profound to me, because it speaks to our interdependence, that we always have a relationship. We're always in relationship with others. So to be aware of that is the first step of, healing and thriving, lives. Another thing you said was that you peel the onion down. You wanted to get down below the layers to the heart of who these people were and the heart of the matter with respect to this conflict. And this is a very Zen thing, is that we have these layers of conditioning that kind of get in the way. So I felt that to be a real kind of intuitive spiritual insight on your part to get below the layers of conditioning. And I wonder how you work with that nowadays. Is it still a challenge because everybody has layers of conditioning, even ourselves. So how do we make sure we're operating at the deepest level of ourselves and touching the deepest level of others?
And that's a good question, Paul. And the root of all dukkha, of all suffering, is the belief, is the attachment to the belief. Dahatma buddhi in Sanskrit, the belief that I am a separate consciousness, that I am a separate body mind from you. It's the root. However, we deal with all of the leaves and the branches and everything else but the root, because the root has to be understood in such a way that, well, if I'm not this body mind, then who am I? Right. That's exactly right. What a great question. That Atma Vichara, that inquiry. Yes. However, that takes time. That really takes time for people to inquire. But you realize that now, to answer your question, there's tools, techniques, sadhanas that we use, that you use, that give people a chance to realize our true nature is not just our thoughts and feelings, sensations and perceptions. They come and go. That which is never changing and ever present is awareness, the presence of being aware. And I call this my Zen finger. With all respect to you, I go. And I think it was Osho in the 9th century, the Zen monk, the Zen master, who first did it. When they'd say, what is Zen? He'd go, and then he would stop and, yeah, that's it. That is it. Just pure being aware. And then it's, I think when you can take them to realize that there are what they are not. And if they're not their thoughts and feelings, and these thoughts just come and go, they're neutral. They're no enemy to a thought. However, when you attach the movie of me to it, the me, and you become a protagonist in the movie to this thought, then that thought becomes a belief. And that belief can fuel and stimulate those neutral sensations in the body, which then become feelings. And then the feelings can ignite emotions. And then it's just a vicious circle. So if we can break into that, knowing that you're not the thoughts, you're not the sensations that purge and merge into beliefs and feelings, then, well, we can let them all come and go. And the only way that I know to do that is to advise in a meditation. I think the meditation practice to me is the pinnacle, because if in a quiet moment you can see thoughts come and go and feelings come and go, agitation come and go, and everything arises perfectly. Just let it come and go. Let it build your let it go muscle, as Sharon Salzberg would say. Then when you come in time of stress or anxiety, well, wow, then let's see how this works for you. I guess the hardest step after that would be to that awareness or consciousness that I truly am, that sunyata, that emptiness, fullness, however you want to describe it with words, which are clumsy, to realize the nature of that. Now that takes some work, that. And that's really, once they get there, then game's over.
The game's over. The game of Zen is over.
This concludes part 1 of our fantastic interview with Pat Croce. We'll be back next week with part 2. If you enjoyed this chat, please comment, share, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to check out the Zen at Work website and sign up for Sensei Paul's newsletter. Links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening and have a great day.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration into Zen Buddhism and its transformative influence on work and life. We hope you'll subscribe, share, and comment wherever you get your podcasts. May your journey be one of continuous growth and mindful living. From all of us here at Game of Zen, wishing you peace and prosperity on your path ahead.